this is, as it were, a slightly personal question, but you have made an amazing and generous decision, which is to donate the proceeds of this book to American Jewish World Service. We are unbelievably appreciative. But I want to know if you can tell me what inspired this donation, which you mentioned to me over a year ago, before the book was written.
Yeah. Well, it's either that or get a Bugatti. and Future and Ace Hood and Wheezy really had me thinking about that Bugatti. Look, I'm one of the most fortunate people in the world. I won the ovarian lottery. I was born in the United States, as Warren Buffett says. And there are people born in the world who have almost no chance. And most of the people, or not most of the people, but I think almost half of the people in the world live on $1 a day or less. And some of the people, particularly women, gay people, lesbians, transgender people, in those circumstances have even a lower chance. And so the ability for somebody like me, who has had every chance to make a contribution to people who need that chance, that's just too good an opportunity to pass up.
Thank you. When you were writing about that, when you did your blog post about that, and you talked about the epidemic of violence against girls and women today, you described it and compared it to the fight to abolish slavery. And I know from traveling with you in the Dominican Republic that the whole history of slavery is something you know a great deal about. And I just sort of wonder, why is that a particular historical passion, and what about that story sort of connects up to what you're doing today?
Yeah, and I should also say, kind of on the last point, that had it not been for my sister Sarah and my wife Felicia, I probably wouldn't even know about the AJWS. So I thank them for their leadership. I'm really a follower on that.
We thank them as well.
So slavery. So when I was a kid, I watched this show, this miniseries that Alex Haley, based on Alex Haley's book Roots, and it just blew me away because, I couldn't even believe that something like that had existed, where everybody would just be like, oh yeah, this is fine, we'll chain people up and break up families and kill people arbitrarily and so forth. It just seemed completely absurd and unbelievable, and I could not understand how it happened. So I spent years actually, really studying. I read every book on slavery that I could, and the more I learned, and one thing was Roots was actually quite incomplete on the history of it. And it was actually kind of much darker and much more difficult than I had imagined. So, one, it had existed for nearly 10,000 years. So human history is the history of slavery. No slavery or highly reduced slavery is something very, very recent. It's only in the last 200 years, and not even really in the last 150 years. And before that, the entire history of humanity was slavery, and this goes back, and if you read the Bible or the Quran carefully, you'll see they endorse it. They love slavery. They tell you, they have instructions on how to do it right. And so it's just kind of part of the culture, part of who we are. And then if you get into the economics of slavery, slaves were very valuable pieces of property in those days. So a slave, the value of a slave was, anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 in today's terms in the U.S. And so that, if you think about something today where you would go to someone and say, okay, you own 20 slaves, so we're just going to take $2 million in value from you, a very challenging just economic thing. So it's in the culture, it's economic, and so forth. And then, it was brutal in the U.S., but other places, in the Caribbean, it was even worse. where if you go back to the start of slavery, 1 million slaves were brought to the U.S. from Africa. 2 million slaves were brought to the Caribbean. At the end of slavery, there were 4 million slaves in the U.S. and 700,000 in the Caribbean. It shows you like just the intensity of the brutality there. And so like this is what it was. And so I got to asking myself, how did it ever end? Like how did that end? Totally built into the culture, like fully part of the economy. Like how did that ever end? And it's amazing, the story. It was a tiny, tiny number of people who just said, like, this has got to stop. People, like a tiny group of leaders. The abolitionists started out, I mean, there was like 7 or 8 key people. And then there were people like Toussaint Louverture, who led the only successful slave rebellion in human history. Not in like, you know, African slave trade, in human history, one successful slave revolution. And I was like, wow, how did they do it? How did they stop slavery with no internet, no nothing? You know, really, I mean, think about that. Like, there's no airplanes. And this guy, Thomas Clarkson, he would like get on a boat and sail from like England to the Caribbean and like write down everything he saw and then get back on the boat and go like try and tell him, hey, this is not what the slave owners are saying. It's way worse. Let me tell you what they do. They like bury slaves down to their neck and they stuff their mouth full of dynamite and they like light it and blow their heads off. Like that's what these guys are doing. Like, do you want to be part of that? And like that is what changed it. And that's what ended slavery. And so, you know, I sit back and I go, then I traveling with Ruth, understanding what's going on in the world. And there are women in the world with no rights. Like they are basically sold, you know, to a husband. And then they have no self-determination, no free will. They're beaten and often killed and not allowed to be educated, just like slaves, you know, so it's not the same, but it's the same. And when you read the defenses of it, it's just like the defenses of slavery. It's like, well, this is our culture. You know, our culture will break if you end this. So, you know, as I, you know, got into that, I felt like, and as a kid, I always said, if slavery ever was around in my day, if it was ever around, I would be like John Newton, I'd be like Thomas Clarkson, I would try to stop it. And then, like, here I am. And so that's where that came from, and that's how I feel about that. Sorry for the long lesson.
No,
but this is a university.